Hello, welcome to another episode of Anupali. I hope you're having a wonderful Sunday with your families and looking forward to a productive new week. This past week, we held 2 community consultations. The first in Good Hope, focusing on the Good Hope Sansove Road project, where in excess of $849,980 will be spent to improve road access to these communities. And the second at the Roosevelt Valley at Cabanis in respect to the construction of retaining walls, which will enhance road safety in that area. Government intends to spend in excess of $1.8 million on that project. On Monday, the 19th April, the Cabinet will travel to Dublin for the contract signing ceremony for the construction of a new bridge in the village of Dublin. It's a much awaited bridge, and finally it's here, thank God. On Tuesday, 20th April, we will hold a contract signing for the Hillsborough Bridge. That is the second bridge, the bridge that collapsed. We'll be reinstating this bridge. That ceremony will take place at the Layo Emergency Shelter. The value of that bridge will be in excess of $8.4 million. This community consultation is a new feature which this Dominica Labour Party-led government has embarked upon to improve transparency in government. Our objective is to provide the public with the necessary information on community activities and to allow the residents the opportunity to engage the cabinet. Every so often, my dear friends, I feel the need to invite journalists to the program to pose the questions to me. I think it is important to provide this platform where I can provide clarification on the issues of the day and on the matters that affect the lives of every Dominican. This evening is an opportunity for the journalists to tackle any issue they wish to address, and I am pleased to welcome them here tonight. The distinguished news editor of DBS Radio, Curtis Matthew, one of the leading voices in Dominican media, and a young journalist who has shown a knack for pointed, sensible questions, Run the Look, a freelance journalist. Mr. Tim Durrell of the DNO was invited, but unfortunately, he could not make it with us tonight. But before I pass on to the journalists, I want to inform the nation that last week, I authorized a donation of $1 million to the government and people of St. Vincent in response to the volcanic eruption. So we're very happy to have been in a position to make such a contribution to the response efforts of the government and people of St. Vincent and Grenadines. In addition to that, we've been supplying a lot of water, and we are urging Dominicans to continue to make contributions in the little or big way that they can towards this effort to our brothers and sisters in St. Vincent. Curtis Matthew and Ms. Luke, I will pass on to you. What I normally do is that I hand over the program to yourselves, and then at some point I will take it back.
Well, we are happy to.
Well, welcome. You feel free to introduce yourself, Curtis, and of course, Ms. Luke.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. We are happy to be here tonight. Curtis Matthew, DBS News Editor for the last how many years? I'm happy to be here this evening.
Good evening to everyone viewing live and listening. Good evening to you, Prime Minister. Rhonda Luke, freelance journalist for just about 5 years now. Happy to be here as well.
Prime Minister, we are going to get straight into the meat of the matter, and we want to first of all look at the economy, especially with news over the weekend that China is realizing economic growth of 18.3% in the first quarter of the year. Most economies have been hit hard by COVID-19, but for China to realize 18.3% growth in the first quarter of the year, many people are saying that they don't know how this has happened. What is the status in Dominica in terms of the economic situation in Dominica as we speak?
Well, there are signs of recovery. The revenue is improving, especially with regards to the VAT revenue. This is the measure we use in terms of consumption within the economy. But, you know, we have to put the Dominican economy in context. I mean, in 2015, we were hit hard by Erica, with 90% of our GDP impacted. 2 years later, we were hit even harder By Maria, where 226% of our GDP was impacted. That's in excess of 310% of GDP. I mean, any country in the world that would have been hit by these successive events to the extent that we were impacted would have had tremendous challenges. But thank God we were able to overcome some of those challenges. Since then, we have been able to build homes, build bridges, build schools, build health centers, health and wellness centers, build hospitals, and ensure the sustenance of the social welfare safety net programs for senior citizens, for various families across Dominica, the National Employment Program, which costs the government about $3.7 million every month. We have been able to pay our pensioners on time. We have been able to pay our salaries on time with no lateness in this. We've been able to meet our debt obligations. So we've been able to do a number of things, notwithstanding the challenges. And we have always said that the prudent and responsible management of the economy is critical in Dominica, especially a small, exposed, vulnerable country like ours, exposed to external shocks, exposed to natural disasters. So we're not where we were expected to be prior to the pandemic. As you know, we had in 2019 about 9% growth, and then we were expecting the 5.8% in 2020, but here came coronavirus and changed things around. But in a very simple response, we are seeing signs of recovery by measuring the consumption within the economy.
We're still on the economic topic. Prime Minister, in last year's budget, you gave the commitment that government would develop fiscal rules that would allow the country to better weather economic shock. And everyone will admit that the pandemic is currently one of them. Where are we as it pertains to the development of those policies? And can you hint some of the new measures that will be implemented in this year's budget to assist the country given the severe economic downturn that we've had because of the pandemic?
Sure. Well, first of all, this government has had a very strong history of fiscal policies and keeping true to those fiscal policies. This is what has helped us weather the storms that we've been experiencing, whether natural disasters or this pandemic. With regards to the fiscal rules, the Cabinet has in fact approved for the development of fiscal rules that would guide the preparation of the national budget, that would guide the oversight of the national budget, and that would ensure that we do not go beyond a particular threshold in terms of spending or borrowing from time to time. But these things also give you the opportunity in the event of a natural disaster, in the event of an external shock, to be able to take certain decisions to provide to our citizens. So we've done that. As you know, in the budget address, we also indicated the creation or the establishment of the Vulnerability Risk Fund.
Yes.
And we have opened an account at the Central Bank. From October of last year, we've been paying into this fund as committed, $500,000 every month from our resources as a savings, so if there's a natural disaster and we need monies immediately, instead of going to the IMF to get a drawdown from a rapid facility, we could go to our Vulnerability Risk Fund. And this, we believe, is an important way to go. We also, as you know, have a draft procurement bill out in the public domain for consultation. We're also looking at the rewriting of the Finance Administration law to update it, to make it more in keeping with the dynamics and the changes in the international financial systems. So there are a number of very important actions that will be taken in addition to the fiscal rules legislation that we intend to pass in the Parliament very soon.
And can you hint, one of the questions, can you hint what new measures will be put in place in this year's budget to address the economic downturn that we've had?
Well, what we seeking to do, as you saw in last year's budget, is to we introduce a number of measures that would encourage investments and also ensure that we keep monies as far as possible in people's pockets. I mean, we had a number of tax measures, whether it is in tourism industry, where we remove the excise tax and import duties on vehicles for the tourism industry, or whether it is the tax amnesty, where many people benefited from this tax amnesty, or whether it's a tax rebate to the private sector in terms of keeping people employed. But this budget, our focus, as always, will be on the public sector investment program. Spending, because in a small economy like ours, government spending is important. Government is really the engine of growth because it is a major consumer of goods and services, and it is the one that spends the most in terms of public infrastructure. We do not have a private sector that spends in public infrastructure, housing, etc., as you may find in other larger countries. So you're going to see a number of the continuation of the health center program. You will see the inclusion of a number of schools that will be financed by the government of China. The international airport will be squarely in this year's budget because we expect work in earnest to commence in 2021 on the construction of the international airport. Of course, the continued investments in agriculture. You would have seen in last year's budget, I made mention of introducing a program to make financing available to the private sector, small business and medium-sized enterprises, some $30 million over a 3-year period. We have decided to advance that amount, and we'll be making sometime in the month of May, there about some $27 million available to the aid bank, who will then on lend to small and medium-sized enterprises in this country. And I believe at concessionary rates, and this is going to be a major plus for small and medium-sized enterprises. And of course, we'll continue to work with the developers for the construction of the many hotels that are under construction, whether it's Skerrit Bay, whether it's Rainforest Resort that's about to commence. I believe that they have signed a contract for the commencement of works in the Roosevelt Valley in Loda. The Hilton is under construction. The Skerrit Bay is under construction. The Marriott is under construction. And there are a number of other smaller type hotels that have benefited from concessions from the government.
Prime Minister, I want to ask you the next question on bus drivers and to consider what happened last week. Have you given a commitment to the bus drivers that they will receive monetary assistance from the government? And the other question to this is, was the action taken by the bus drivers, protest action, was that illegal?
Well, I will respond to the second part of the question first. Anybody who is withholding his services to the public is not against the law, or anybody who is driving his vehicle slowly within the speed limit is not breaking the law. You break the law if you deny other people access and you block unnecessarily public roads. This is against the law. And if you do not obey the instructions of the police in terms of adhering to the rule of law. So I will not be a judge of this. The police will be on whatever actions they will take. That's a matter for the courts to determine if the matter goes to court. But I believe that the actions taken by the bus drivers, the action was not necessary, because at the time they took that action, we were in discussions with them. As a matter of fact, the Wednesday before, Minister Blackmore called one of the gentlemen who we have been in touch with and to ask him to communicate with the other team members that we would like to meet with them on that Wednesday afternoon, that Wednesday evening, to seek to put in place a mechanism of how do we go about providing them with some kind of support in light of the challenges that they're experiencing. Now, one will have to accept that the situation with bus drivers 10 years ago and now is completely different. You have more buses on the road than you had 10 years ago. And likewise, you had more private vehicles on the road than you had 10 years ago. And so my engagement with the bus drivers was not only about the present day challenge, but the future, to ensure that they can sustain their businesses and what actions I believe they can take to enhance their profitability and to ensure that they can survive, because there are a number of people who quite rightly have invested to get a second income. There are people in the private sector, there are people in the public service, and we do not want to condemn them for that. That is part of the free market economy. People see an opportunity, they use the excess monies and they invest, and that's good. So we engage them, but one would have to take into consideration, as I said to the bus drivers, that you're not the only one who has been impacted by the coronavirus. Everybody has. Government has. You have other service providers, tour guides who rely on tourists being here to earn a living. The vendors on the Bayfront and the Emerald Pool and the Roosevelt Valley and the Carnival Territory, elsewhere, who depend on the presence, especially of cruise visitors, to survive. So all of them have been impacted. What did we do? We provide funds at the aid bank at 1% of up to $15,000 per person. There are several bus drivers who took the money. And also we placed $15 million at the Social Security to provide income support for 3 months in the first instance. We have since increased that period to 1 year. Where people who have been directly impacted by the coronavirus insofar as their income is concerned would get income support as a grant to them. And many bus drivers have taken advantage of this and so forth. But that notwithstanding, we recognize that the coronavirus has persisted beyond what we all expected to. We thought that at the end of 2020, that would be it, and we'd be ushering a new year, 2021, with no coronavirus. But the situation persists. There are lockdowns in the main source markets in Europe and North America and within the Caribbean region. So we will be providing some support to these bus drivers and also other persons in the tourism industry who are the hardest hit by this coronavirus and so forth. And very soon we will outline the specific support that we'll provide to them and to other persons who are in the tourism industry who've been impacted.
So the bus drivers are not the only ones who will be receiving government support very soon?
Because the reality is they're not the only ones who've been affected. You know, there's all I can say about the bus driver. I met with them, but I don't think time would allow us to give an expose of my engagement with them and the advice I give to them on how I believe that they have to conduct the business and in order for them to survive, because some of the challenges that they're having now were not necessarily brought on by COVID-19. These are pre-COVID-19 challenges that I have suggested to them, ways I believe that they can go about to addressing them, and we're prepared to work with them to addressing some of the challenges that they're confronting.
Prime Minister, we understand that at this moment you are not prepared to share what exactly happened at that meeting of the bus drivers and what government is prepared to do. But just last week Sunday, you indicated that if the bus drivers proceeded with the protest action, negotiations between your government and the bus drivers, it would be taken off the table. We all witnessed what happened on Monday. According to them, you guys met on Tuesday and you reached an agreement. The public is asking why the change of heart. Can you disclose to us why you had that change of heart to meet with them?
Because I'm a very nice guy. I invoke biblical scripture. Father, forgive them for they know what they're doing. Or know what they're saying. I think they were ill-advised. I think some of them were taken advantage by some political operatives who don't have their interest at heart. But I have, as the leader of the country, I have a responsibility to look beyond people's own foolishness and to save them from themselves. So I'm really saving the bus drivers from themselves, and I admonish them when I met with them, and they will tell you. The reality is some of them really do need the help, and I don't think it's wise for me to withhold the help from them because of their foolishness, and so I am protecting them from themselves in that regard. But we have to be true to ourselves, and I think those bus drivers who I met prior to their actions were not necessarily true to themselves, and I think they all recognized, because I met some of them, they all recognized that they were used. As a matter of fact, there are political operatives who were encouraging them to go back on the streets, on the road the following day, and I think common sense prevailed, and they refused to go. But I have, I'm looking beyond that, and so we'll provide them with some support. But But what I will say to people is, nobody should ever think that they can threaten me or try to extort monies from me for the government. So that's not these things don't happen with me. My ideological and philosophical makeup doesn't allow me to be subjected to those kind of actions. But in this case, I think these people were ill-advised, and I think they became the laughing stock of the society. I mean, people were ridiculing them for their actions. So they recognize that, and I think that they have been able to humble themselves.
Let me also ask you, Prime Minister, the protest by the bus drivers, it has also prompted calls for something to be done about Dominica's public transportation sector. The new Alternative People's Party said that it will reform the public transportation service if it gets into office. The DAIC has also called for the resumption of discussion by stakeholders for a comprehensive action plan for the public sector. Does your government have any plans to reform the public transportation here in Dominica, and what are those plans?
Well, I spoke to, when I met with the bus drivers, I think some of these changes have to come from the bus drivers themselves. And one of the things I suggested to the bus drivers is that they need to better organize themselves. They cannot run a business from a sack wash. They have to be registered, they have to be organized in terms of association, and to be in a position to advocate for the challenges. You recall a few years ago, there was a major demonstration by bus drivers against bus drivers in Stock Farm, because the people who run in the Stock Farm, the State College route, were of the view that people should not come from elsewhere and into their area. And so one of the things I suggested to them is that we need to look at the issue of routes and who is authorized to get into to pile a route. But these are things sometimes that the bus drivers themselves are resisting. So I don't think the government should take any hardline approach to this thing. It has to be part of a consultation, it has to be part of an education, it has to be part of an engagement, and we are prepared to engage the bus drivers on this. And I think that my preoccupation really is on people who rely on driving a bus for their livelihood, and to ensure that we can assist them, and we can assist them in organize, and where the reforms are necessary, then we will certainly facilitate those reforms. But I will not want the cabinet to take a decision and say, okay, well, these are the new policies in respect to public transport in Dominica. I think it has to be part of a consultation going forward.
Prime Minister, the complaint of alleged treating by you and 2014 candidates of the Dominica Labour Party, that took a new twist over the last 3 days when the Chief Magistrate announced that matter will take place on the 13th of May. So that matter will go to the court on the 13th of May. Did that come as a surprise to you as Prime Minister, of course? Well,
first of all, this matter before the courts against myself and some of my colleagues is really nonsense. Really nonsense. I mean, and the reality is the opposition party in Dominica is really has no moral compass and has no ethical standings. You'll recall that myself and Peter Seja were challenged by the United West Party for allegations of dual citizenship and therefore not being qualified to contest elections in Dominica. At the same time they were doing that, their leader, Mr. Ron Green, was an American citizen, and he hadn't had a Dominican passport for decades, even when he was as a minister of government, traveling on official business, traveling on U.S. passport. The United West Party has itself brought on entertainers on the political platform, whether it's local entertainers or regional entertainers. I mean, a couple of years ago, one election ago, they had Richie Spice from Jamaica. They had this lady, is it Itana, on there, in Dominica. And so, and do we really believe that by having somebody on stage that is going to change somebody's position to vote? I mean, really? I mean, people vote a party and an individual based on the level of confidence and trust that they have in that individual, in that party, and the party which has the better policies and programs and a track record. And there's no other part, there's no party in Dominica that can trump the Dominica Labour Party in that regard. And when you compare leadership, and I say so with the greatest of humility, I mean, it is chalk and cheese between myself and Mr. Linton, in every single category. So for the opposition elements to take this matter to court is unfortunate. The matter is before the courts, and a date has to be set. But where's the evidence? You have to present the evidence. It's one thing to say this and to say that, but where's the evidence and so on? So I am not at all perturbed by this. I really don't see how this can go anywhere in any serious democracy. It is really a sham and an effort to distract. I mean, every election from 2005, the UWP has challenged elections. I mean, to challenge my victory in the Vegas constituency, I mean, is really, really laughable. I mean, I got about 90% plus of the votes in the constituency. You're saying I didn't win? You're saying that it's some artists that came and caused me to win Vegas? And Ian Douglas in Portsmouth, and Justin Charles in Granby, and Reggie Ostry in Cottage, and Lady Daniel in Collier, and Blackburn Maho. Give me a break. I mean, you think that really making sense, Dominicans? I mean, set aside your political considerations. You really believe that makes sense? But this is what the UWP has come to be known for. Not interested in the welfare and well-being of Dominicans. Not interested in putting forward policies and programs that could better the lives of Dominicans, and to have these theatrical activities taking place.
Yeah, well, with the Chief Magistrate having set a date, the 13th of May, it means that you have to prepare a response to
these matters are leaving the hands of lawyers. We have our lawyer, and our lawyers will deal with this matter. I have recognized that Ms. Shillingford, who we thought was representing the complainants, has indicated by way of writing to our attorney that she is not representing the complainants in this matter. And I believe that my lawyers have written to the complainant. One has been being evasive. He doesn't want to be served with the letter. The other was served, had to be trapped to be served. So if you're taking somebody to court, you should be the one who should want to shake the courts to meet. It shouldn't be the person who has to respond to you. And we the ones who are asking for the evidence. Bring the evidence to us, and so that we have the discoveries and so on, so we can ramble in the courts. But I am not perturbed by this. This is I'm not perturbed by this. I'm focused on the challenges that we confront in this country and improving the lives of Dominican people.
Prime Minister, you stated that Dominica will accommodate 300 Vincentians who were expected to arrive early last week. According to media reports, the Prime Minister of St. Vincent has indicated that many of the Vincentians don't want to leave their country. As of now, have you received any definite word that Dominica will accommodate these evacuees?
Well, we made the offer based on a plea or request by the governor of St. Vincent and the Grenadines of the need for them to evacuate out of St. Vincent and the Grenadines between 7,000 to 8,000 Vincentians who have been impacted directly by the eruption of the volcano. And recognizing our circumstance and our means, we believe that we are able to comfortably accommodate about 300 Vincentians, 300 individuals from St. Vincent. So the offer is still on the table. I am not surprised that people do not want to move. This is unlike Maria, where everybody was out of work, everybody's home was affected, and you had a serious shelter crisis. You do have a shelter challenge in St. Vincent because many families in shelters and by relatives. But people who want to see what happens to their homes that they left in the northern zone, their animals, their crops, their businesses. There may be people who've been working outside of the red zone and working in the green zone and who still have a job, and they want to make sure that they study things before they go. I know last week we received a communication from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of St. Vincent and Grenadines indicating to us that there are 21 Vincentian nationals who have indicated their willingness to come to Dominica to reside for the period of time, which is about 5 months or so. So there are discussions between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Dominica and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of St. Vincent and Grenadines because they requested a meeting to discuss the protocols, what is required of the Vincentian nationals before they depart from St. Vincent, and what will be required of them when they arrive in Dominica, and what are the arrangements being made for them. So we have identified the accommodation, and we have all of the internet and electricity and water, everything connected there, beds and utensils and pots and pans and cooking equipment and so forth. So we're ready to receive them. Obviously, we have to work on the administrative protocols between ourselves and the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Prime Minister, my next question is on sports. A sportsman myself, I need to ask you something about the way forward for sports. The government has spoken about massive investments in sports, but some still feel that the government, in terms of direct policy for sports, where we head into, some feel that the government is lacking in that area. Is that the case as far as you're concerned?
But what specifically though? I mean, I'm not sure in terms of policy what specifically they're saying.
Yeah, some people feel that a direct plan in terms of what the government would like to see moving forward, they've not seen that. Do you get that impression at all?
Well, I know there's been talk about the national sports policy and the National Sports Council, sorry. There have been discussions on this for a very long time. This has been largely spearheaded by Mr. Joseph Thomas, and I really want to give him credit. I think in that regard, the national organizations need to get more involved. Because really and truly, they're the ones who are running sports in Dominica. It's the DOC, the DFA, the Olympic Committee, and etc., Dominica Amateur Volleyball Association. I think that there has to be a greater coordination and collaboration among those stakeholders, and to work with the government to fill whatever gaps they believe are there in sports development. But one cannot question the fact that this government, unlike any other, has spent more money in developing sports facilities across Dominica, whether it's hard courts or basketball courts or playing fields or national facilities, or investing in athletes and investing in organizations that provide opportunities for young people, scholarships, etc. I think there has to be a greater collaboration between the Ministry of Sports, the Sports Division, and the various sporting organizations. But this government is committed, and you've seen the tangible manifestation of this government's commitment in sports, especially in a difficult time. The number of sporting facilities that are under construction, whether it's in the stadium, whether it's an improvement of the stadium itself, whether it's the hard courts that we built at the stadium, whether it's the Marsac basketball court, whether it's the over close to $1 million or so being spent in Woodfordale. Some work is being done on Point Michel hard court. You go to Pichler, you go to Bacatel, you go to Paybush, improvements there, within some work in Benz. There are a number of planes in Collyho, there's some work being done there. It's a number of interventions in Grand Bay that we are having now in this difficult period. And in any country in the world now, with all of the challenges that countries are having, including Dominica, sports really would not be on the agenda. I mean, in terms of priorities, if you have 20 priorities, sports will not be anywhere because of the financial consideration. That's not the case in the Commonwealth of Dominica. We continue to invest heavily in sports. And I must say, too, that the sports enthusiasts, the sportsmen and women, they already recognize that I have good public comments from a number of them on the various programs. And we will continue to work with them to improving the sporting facility. I think one of the things that I'm hearing in the public is the issue of time out for people who are part of the national team. In the government, while there may be no specific legislation in that regard, but we do allow people to have time out. I think it's a matter for the private sector to also get on board. But I think I agree with Joseph Thomas wholeheartedly that the realization of the National Sports Council would help address a number of these issues, if the specific policies for the development of sports and development of programs for sports development in Dominica. And I think the National Council would be in a very good position to assist in addressing some of the shortcomings or some of the gaps that the public have identified.
That National Sports Council you spoke about, is there a role for the government? Is there anything that you all can do to facilitate?
Yeah, there's a draft, the draft document that was prepared with funds from the government of Dominica. So, and it's sometime now we've been working on this. But I think we need to get the associations to take it and to run with it. I think it is better placed in the associations to really hold it and rest it down to the ground and advise the government on it, but in large measure, the government has been really at it, and sometimes almost the Lone Ranger, George Thomas, So I really like to see the association taking it. But I've read the document thoroughly. Certainly needs some updating and some improvements. But I believe it will be a good start to addressing the national coordination of sports and sports development in Dominica.
Okay, Prime Minister, on the topic of child abuse. Recently, there was an article posted on Dominica News Online where a young man from Wesley was fined only $800 for placing his 3-year-old stepson in a wash machine as a means of punishment. Now, the Chief Magistrate, in handing down her sentence, she lamented that our laws as it pertains to these matters, they are way too lenient. Prime Minister, what is your government position on this concerning issue of child abuse and our laws as it relates to child abuse, and what new changes can we expect, the public expect, to ensure that these perpetrators, they don't walk away with just a mere slap on the wrist when they do those crimes?
Well, I'm not going to criticize the decision of the magistrate, but I believe the prosecution could have looked at other charges on this matter. So it's not only one charge of child abuse, and there are a number of other charges, I believe, that one could have considered in this matter. This is totally unacceptable. And in my view, this kind of actions warrant jail time. So I believe that that there could have been other charges that I read this decision. There could have been other charges that could have been proffered against this gentleman, and that would have caused him to be subjected to a stiffer penalty. We have gun crimes there too. Gun laws are very stringent, and you still get the magistrate charging people $200 and $400, and they go home, with firearms. So sometimes it's not necessarily the legislation. I think we have to send a very strong message to these people. But is a point that we have noted, and we were looking at the specific section of the law to see what needs to be done to address this issue, if there's an issue. But I believe that there could have been other charges. And I think we all have to speak out, not only when something happens about the child abuse and so on, but continuously, and educating people and because we have to protect the most vulnerable among us. And every one of us has a duty and obligation to do so. There are just too many children, I believe, that have been subjected to this kind of abuse, whether it's verbal or physical. We really have to be united on this and vociferous on this matter, because one child being abused is one child too many, so we're certainly taking note of this issue where the penalties are concerned, and if there's a need to strengthen them, to make them tougher, then we'll do so.
The Parliament is to convene sometime next week on the 26th of this month. What are some of the highlights coming up for this sitting of Parliament this year?
Well, I was hoping to get a question from the leader of the opposition in respect to the bus drivers and how much you think I should give the bus drivers and so on, but I have no question on this. It's some other questions and so on. But there are two main resolutions that will be taken to Parliament. One has to do with the contracting of a loan from the World Bank. That is the $67 million budget support loan that requires parliamentary approval. And the second is a loan that was taken from the Caribbean Development Bank. So there are two resolutions before the Parliament. There's also some minor amendments to existing legislation. One has to do with the court fees and being able to the bill using technology to make payments to the courts, and also the amendments to the Dominica Solid Waste Management Act. It's a very simple management in respect to the composition of the board of directors. So these are essentially the main things that will be taken to Parliament. So, and of course, there's a supplementary appropriation that will be presented to Parliament as well.
As we speak on Parliament, Prime Minister, during the 2020-2021 budget address, you informed the nation that government was finalizing a draft procurement bill for publication. We know that earlier this year, stakeholders and the public, they had the opportunity to send their feedback on the bill, which is intended to replace the Public Procurement and the Contract Administration Act of 2012. So what is the feedback that government has received thus far for the year since it's been open to the public? And when is this bill intended to be tabled before Parliament?
Well, I don't have the details of the comments of the public. That would reside with the Financial Secretary. And of course the Office of the Attorney General, who will then advise me on the efficacy of the recommendations being made by the public in respect to the draft procurement bill. Once we're hoping that we could take this before the budget. If not, we'll certainly take it during the budget debate. It's an important piece of legislation. We believe that it captures a number of the salient points, and it meets international best practices. We have gotten support in its drafting from the World Bank and from the Caribbean Development Bank. We've also gotten feedback from the European Union, because we felt it's important that we engage our development partners in that regard. And of course, consultation with the various stakeholders. It's on the government website. Anybody in the country or outside the country can in fact make recommendations, suggestions, observations in respect to the draft bill. So I think very soon the public consultation will close, and we will review the submissions made by the various stakeholders and individuals. And then where we believe that they make sense, we shall include them. Where we don't believe, then that will be what it is. But I'm hoping that we could have taken it before the end of the financial year. But if not, we'll certainly take it very early in the financial year.
Prime Minister, recently the Ministry of Labor was hit by controversy. A senior member there of the ministry arrested and charged with the illegal issuance of work permits. Yet still, the Ministry of Labor, in a statement 2 days later, suggested that the systems there for work permits, the systems are foolproof and reliable. Has the government been concerned about these matters at the Ministry of Labor?
Well, I do not want to comment specifically on the matter before the courts, because I don't want to in any way to prejudice the proceedings. I agree with the Ministry of National Security and in statement that the procedures and the system that are in place are robust. And I believe if everyone follows the system, then we shouldn't have any problems. There are prescribed fees in law for government services. And anybody in the public who has to pay to the government for a service, you need to ask the officer to show you the legislation that captures the the prescribed fees. And you have no obligation to pay any public officer in any system, anywhere, more than what the law prescribes. And you're not authorized, or a public officer is not authorized to even accept a tip or anything in respect to services rendered to the public. So it's important for the public to also be mindful of the prescribed fees, that every fee is prescribed in law, and when you pay, you must get a receipt, because you're obligated to get a receipt that you've paid to the government of Dominica, whether it's $5 or $10 or $200 or $20. So it's important for all of us for everyone to respect the law, respect the processes, respect the procedure, because the reality is no public officer in this country has a discretion in terms of these things. These things are prescribed in law, and we all have to continue to follow the law, and the public itself must follow the law. So you cannot pay the government less, and you ought not to pay the government more for any service that you have to pay to receive.
Prime Minister, we are just 4 months into this year, and 3 individuals have stated that they are going to seek redress against the police force for what they label as a police brutality. Those individuals include the Prosper family, we also have the Julian family, and the most recent, Mr. George. Is it your government concerned about what many are suggesting as excessive force by the police in such matters between the police and the civilians? And what are you prepared to do as Prime Minister of the country to remedy the situation?
Well, it's not me, the law. Nobody is above the law. The only person in the country who is immune to prosecution is the president. Everyone else in the country is subjected to the laws of the Commonwealth of Dominica. So whether you're a police officer or you're a bus driver or you're a politician or you're a school teacher, we all are subject to the laws of the country. And the Constitution provides for people's rights and privileges, and we all have to respect each other's rights as enshrined in the Constitution of our country. The issue of police brutality, no matter where it happens, should not be tolerated, and I can say that this government will not tolerate it. We will not get involved in the process, but we will but the Attorney General's office has an obligation as the legal custodian to ensure that everybody's rights as provided for is respected and protected, and that every complaint is investigated like any other complaint brought to the police. Every one of the instances will be different, so I do not want to speak to any one of them individually because I know that they are matters that are under investigation and et cetera, and I don't want anybody to think that I am compromising that particular process. I've been very careful in all my years as Prime Minister not to get involved in these things. But the resources are there to investigate. The resources are there to prosecute. And the court system has the resources to carry out its function as mandated in law. So, but one cannot also not say that in many instances, where we've had the protests, for want of a better word, the police generally have exercised restraint. I mean, look at what's happening in the United States of America. It's rubber bullets, tear gas, water cannons, hundreds of people arrested, et cetera. We have to understand that while we can demonstrate our disgust or our dissatisfaction with a particular matter, we must do it within the confines of the law, and not engage ourselves in troublemaking. So, but that's the investigation of these matters are ongoing, and they will be investigated and so forth. But the police also has a duty to maintain law and order, and people must not believe that they can come and assault the police officers or assault citizens and not be responded with. Otherwise, what's going to happen to you and anybody else when somebody comes to your home to violate your rights? So we have to be very careful in this country that we don't politicize that discussion and make it a partisanship issue. And then when we find ourselves in difficulties or our rights have been violated, who are we going to call? And when we call the police, how do we expect the police to respond? And the police cannot allow lawlessness to take place and just stand by idly, and not bring order into the country. This is a democracy. This is a modern society. And in every modern society, the police is authorized to take action within reason and within measure to maintain law and order, because the police has a duty to protect the protesters from himself and also the people who are going about their daily lives from other people. But where there is excessive action on the part of the police, it's important for the police to investigate. And if the police is of the view, based on consultation with the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, that charges should be brought against any individual, then it should be done irrespective of who the individual is. So this is what I would say in this matter, but we have to certainly ensure that we all respect the rule of law.
Prime Minister, my next question is on electoral reform. Some say in Dominica, you speak about electoral reform, you don't necessarily want electoral reform. But of course, Sir Dennis Byron has been contracted to undertake the process of electoral reform in Dominica. Where is he at this moment?
May I ask this people a question? If you go to somebody, tell the person that I want a car, and the car costs $40,000, and I give you $40,000 to go buy the car, you tell me that I'm interested in buying the car for you? I mean, we have provided the Electoral Commission with all of the resources that are required for the effecting of electoral reform. The software, the hardware, the human resources, from a public relations officer to deputy, to other staff, training, and we also went as far as drafting legislation to allow the commission to carry out its work. That was the only missing element. And we went to Parliament twice with it. We brought in somebody from the Commonwealth Secretariat who has experience in drafting legislation like this and also involved in electoral reform in many countries. As you know, the Commonwealth is an organization of 53 nations. And they have very profound knowledge and experience and expertise in that area. And they said the legislation is fine. Recognizing that this thing has become a bit controversial in Dominica, we decided to bring in an independent arbiter in the world-renowned jurist, Sir Dennis Byron. So Dennis Byron has been carrying out his duties. There was a delay because of coronavirus and the delay in the appointment of the chairman of the Electoral Commission. But since then, consultations have commenced, and many organizations and individuals were written to, soliciting feedback and comments from them in respect to electoral reform. And I believe following this, there'll be town hall meetings obviously carried by the use of technology so that people can hear the views of Sir Dennis Byron, who will then make recommendations. Also, one of his mandates is to look at the existing drafts and to determine whether the existing draft meet the requirements of what we're seeking to achieve. We've also written to the Organization of American States last year and the Commonwealth Secretariat to assist Sir Dennis Byron in the carrying out of his duties. We've also authorized him to engage the OECS Commission with Dr. Jules and to look at the best practices and to come up with some recommendations. The reality is I would love for this to be concluded as the soonest. This whole electoral reform stuff. I don't necessarily believe that we need electoral reform based on the premise that people are saying about elections have not been free and fair in Dominica. We've always had free and fair elections in Dominica. But in every legislation, in every system, every so often you have to do some review. You have to take into consideration changing in times and so forth. But the issue that here we have is in regards to the opposition party. They would like for this to remain an issue at every election. So it is they who do not want it. Because they say one thing today, the leader of the opposition will say one thing today, and then tomorrow morning he says something differently. You see what I'm saying? So they have not been consistent. And this is why we wrote to them some time ago, before the last election, to say, look, this is the draft legislation we have. What in this draft legislation you don't agree with? And what do you agree with? So if you want something to happen, and you're given an opportunity to determine what you want to happen very clearly, unambiguously, you'll fail to do so. I would love for electoral reform to be concluded, because taking out electoral reform on the agenda, what is really going to talk about this? You know, nothing else is a bunch of salacious writings and these things that are going on there that they believe that can change the minds of Dominican people. This Labour Party fights its elections fairly and squarely, and people know that this party and the leadership of this party, you can rely on him, especially in difficult times. You understand? And you need experienced leadership in these times. I mean, there are a number of people, including UWP supporters, very strong supporters of him, who are saying, thank God he's not United Workers Party is in government now with this COVID-19. We would be in serious problems. You understand? I mean, I do not think they would know where to turn. But I would love to have electoral reform done and completed. And I look forward, I'm really hoping that we can conclude this, at least the legislation, this year, and then use 2022 to roll out the actions of coming out of this legislation and the recommendations of Sir Dennis. So I really would like to have this thing done and over with as quickly as possible. What we have to guard against in this country is, and you see in the United States, where several companies have boycotted the state of Georgia, where people feel that the state government there has taken decisions and passed legislation to deny people their franchise. And we have to be very careful that we don't deny people their right to vote. And we have to be very careful. This is a fundamental right, you know, and we should not get it muddied in who we support. We have to support what is a human right. And a human right doesn't have color. Whether you're black or white, whether you're red or blue, it's you have rights as a human being. And so we must be able to articulate what these rights are and what actions you must take to facilitate people's access to that right. And what actions you must not take to deny people access to these rights. And understand? I mean, how many? Every one of us who wanted to vote in Dominica has voted in every election, and who has voted, for somebody else? I mean, do we really have electoral fraud in Dominica? I mean, really? I mean, come on. When you're in a polling station, you're from a small village of Buetica. Every party has an agent in there. Who in Dominica doesn't know Dominica people?
Prime Minister, in 2018, your government announced that 18 acres of land is being acquired in Makushui to create a new development for the residents of Kulibishri who were first impacted by Tropical Storm Erica and then Hurricane Maria. The parliamentary representative for the Mau constituency has also announced that land is being acquired in Warner for the residents of Campbell, another vulnerable community. We are just 2 months away from the start of the 2021 Atlantic hurricane season, which researchers are saying are showing similar characteristics to that of 2017 when we went through Hurricane Maria and other years. So my question to you is, what is the status of government's plans to relocate these individuals?
Well, we are committed to those plans. Those plans are being worked on. Obviously, this will be done in a gradual basis, in a phase basis. We have been a bit slow in the finalization of the acquisition of the land in Makushri. So I think the Ministry of Housing needs to give greater attention to this. We're making movements. We will acquire from the Dominica Social Security the over 200 acres of land that it has in Warner so that we can develop into housing. As you know, we're developing in Warner. We're going to be developing in Warner. We have the concept note and we're developing the project. The program, what they call a future housing development, to provide housing for public servants, to private sector people, and also many people in diaspora have reached out to us saying that we would like to buy a house if the government is going to build those homes and so forth. And it to be a real modern community, taking all of the resilient aspects into consideration. And so we're going to be twinning the relocation of the residents of Campbell to this. The reality is, Campbell would have been by now been relocated if the folks had agreed to my suggestion in 2007. So it's 2007 I went to Campbell and I said, look, this place is vulnerable, we have to move. But like all of us, we grew up in a particular community. That's where we have our livelihoods, our home. To be dislocated, is always a challenge for many people. So but I think there are some people who have agreed now to relocate, having experienced the major landslides they had in 2007. Then in 2010, there was an incident. In Erica, they were impacted. Maria, they were impacted. And I think generally people believe that it's time for us to look at moving. Obviously, taking the people in the most vulnerable areas first and having them relocated. So we committed to this. And I believe very soon we will finalize the documentation on this particular housing development in Warner and be in a better position to articulate and to present to the residents in both Warner, both Campbell and Macushri in detailed plans for the relocation. At least some of them.
Thank you.
I'm told that we are at the last few minutes.
Yeah.
Prime Minister, my final question though. Is the World Creole Music Festival likely to happen in 2021?
I would say likely to happen. Likely to happen. Obviously, one has to take into consideration because we can't have a Creole festival just for ourselves. It would make no sense. So the Creole festival was established and created to attract tourists, to bring people in. To stay in the hotels and guest houses and use our taxis, our car rentals and restaurants and our goods and services. So one would have to look at what's happening elsewhere and whether people are able to move. What would be the new protocol on vaccination? Is the situation if you're vaccinated, then you only come to the country, there is no need to be quarantined. All of these things are questions that people are asking and so forth. We have the cruise ships that would like to come. I may be very well be in a position to tell the cruise ships, yes, you can come in June, but we also ourselves have to ensure that we too are vaccinated, because very likely we may say to tourists coming in, you have to be properly vaccinated and get the cruise ships to verify this in the advanced passenger information system. So it's a bit early. We'll see how it goes. We have to look at the vaccination situation. As you see, in North America, I just saw a statement coming out from the government of Canada that they're concerned about the increased number of cases. That is almost aligned to that of the United States of America. We've seen countries going through the 4th lockdowns in Europe. Guadeloupe and Martinique are major source markets. If they are still in lockdown or the governments have imposed certain restrictions on them, then, can they come? If the ferries cannot come to Dominica. So we have to look at what's happening with our stakeholders external to Dominica. But the key for us in Dominica is for us to prepare ourselves. And I believe vaccination is an important element in that preparation. You understand? So that we can protect ourselves and place ourselves in a better position of defense against this virus. So, but if we're in a position to host the Creole Festival, we shall host the Creole Festival. But I do not want to say no at this stage. Neither do I want to say definitively yes at this stage. It all depends on a number of other elements. I've been told that we're run out of time. Do you have a last question, Ms. Luke?
A final question, Prime Minister. There have been numerous calls for a Freedom of Information bill here in Dominica, which many say, among other things, will increase the accountability and the transparency, and it will boost public trust in government. Do your government intend to enact a Freedom of Information bill in the near future?
Sure, we have no problem with that. I mean, this is the most transparent government you can find anywhere in the Western Hemisphere. I mean, we're very open. But these things are already academic in nature. A lot of these things have been put where people go to some workshop, some NGO overseas, and they come back and they say, well, we need that in Dominica and this in Dominica. But I have no personal view against freedom of information legislation in Dominica at all. This government is an open book. So, so no problem. You're here with me. We have public consultations, questions of all kind of nature asked of me in Parliament. 99% make no sense, but that's how it is. So I have no problem with this at all. But I want to thank you very much. I'm open. Feel free to call me anytime if you have any additional questions. There's nothing really we cannot discuss except maybe national security matters that are beyond, that have to be kept confidential. Otherwise, I'm open to this discussion. I want to thank the listeners again. I want to send special condolences to my dear friends in Lower Penville on the passing of my Fidina Gilbert, my dear friend from Abakwaib, who passed on last Wednesday, and also to Glory and to all the family members there, and to my dear sincere friend Teresa E13, who passed away yesterday. A very wonderful lady, humble lady, very wonderful lady. It is really people like Teresa E13 who keeps me going. Very saddened by her death, and so I extend to her children my sincere condolences, and I'll be there with them, both in prayer and physically to provide support to them. So these are my two very good friends. I remember, when you're able to have a dance with a 78-year-old lady, as I did with Marfelina, you consider yourself to be blessed, and going to their homes and engaging in friendly exchanges, memories that I will never forget. And so I'm really saddened by the death, and may the good Lord bless them, and may their soul rest in eternal peace. Let us continue to build this country. This is our country. Let us look at the glass half full rather than half empty. This is a sign of our gratitude for what the Lord has done for us. Life could be certainly worse off. So let us not. There's a story that somebody was saying that the child was complaining about a pair of shoes he wanted. He wanted a particular pair of shoes, and I think a pair of Nikes, and he making a fuss. Until he met somebody with no feet. So. Let us be grateful for what we have, and let us build on what we have. Monday, tomorrow, we'll go to Jubla, as I said, for the public consultation on the construction of the bridge. This bridge will cost over $1 million. Over $1 million, just to connect two roads, in a village. So people talk about these things in abstract to the cost, and say, well, Skerrit should do this, Skerrit should do that, and so on. But people don't understand these things cost a lot of money. And also the construction of the second bridge in Hillsborough, over $8.5 million will be spent on this bridge. $8.9 million will be spent on that bridge. In difficult times. Very soon we will issue a contract for the construction of the road from the Hillsborough Bridge to the bridge built for us by the Chinese government. And the second phase will be from that bridge to this other community going towards the junction in Ponkasi. What's the community name again? It always slips me. Sultan, yeah. So that we can improve this access. And we will be constructing the retaining wall in Red Gully, and then Penrice, just before you get to the Bells Bridge. And then after the school in Bells, you get a first set of drums that will be constructed, and then we will tackle this massive wall in Bells that will cost a significant amount of money. So we're doing this smaller walls first, and then we will tackle this big fellow head on. Thank you very much. God bless you. I want to thank you, Curtis and Ms. Luke, for your questions. Again, we're open. We're hoping that we have the press conference with the ministers, Minister Laville and Minister Roberts, on Thursday this week, God's willing. Thank you. God bless you. Let's go forth and serve our country and to serve our God, our risen God. Thank you very much.